That's right. We're counting down the hits. We could do that, right? Top 10 reasons why John Elway kicks ass. That and more coming up today. Orange and blue A. It is Cecil Lammey. It is Andrew Mason. And Orange and Blue Today is here for you. 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And we are here, Mace. It's Orange and Blue Today presented by Champ Honda. A good day, Mace. And, we're still working through some of the rookie mini camp thoughts and stories and storylines from Saturday. We got more after today, but it's nice every day. It's like we chip away a little bit, right? At all the stories that we got from Saturday's practice.
Yeah, we've talked about Marvin Mims Jr. We've talked about Drew Sanders. You just kind of start going down the list here. I'm not sure we're going to do an entire segment on Alex Forsyth, with all due respect to him, until we see a little bit more and actually see some work with the pads when we get into training camp. But we can see a few things, and certainly as we get into OTAs next week, we'll actually see where these players fit in the overall structure of the depth chart, even though we're not supposed to report who's practicing with who, how persnickety that the teams get. And I imagine Sean Payton is going to take things to another level of persnicketyness and paranoia, I would say, but that's we'll work around it.
I would think so as well. Quickly on Alex Forsyth, and probably the only Alex Forsyth talk that we'll have until training camp, our friend Emory Hunt. And I have all the world's respect for Emory Hunt. He is one of the best. When him and Teron Davenport started Football Game Plan years ago on YouTube as a small YouTube channel, now Teron's on ESPN and Emory is on CBS Sports. Two of our dear friends, two of the hardest workers. We see Emory at the Shrine Bowl every year, at the Senior Bowl every year. And he also does the other games as well. He's all over the place. He had Forsyth as his number one center.
Yeah,
that shocked me. I don't have him. I don't think he makes a team. But when Emory Hunt is saying that, Mesa it makes me a little nervous about my rankings. I'm like, wait a second, maybe I should reconsider what I think of Alex Forsyth.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: Emory is very, very, very confident in the ratings that he does, and he's also very independent about the ratings that he does. Like if you're looking at the rankings from, say, 20 draft pundits and there's one that's an outlier, it's probably going to be Emory Hunt. But he has hit on quite a few of those instances where he's championed a player who may have fallen in the draft process. So at the very least, it makes you take a second look at Alex Forsyth. The other thing on Forsyth is just, again, focusing on what they do, not what they say. What they did in Sean Payton's first draft was add a day 3 interior offensive lineman, and they had day 3 interior offensive lineman last year in Luke Wattenberg. You're going with different concepts. You're going with a more power-based blocking scheme up front now, and that may well favor Forsyth over Wattenberg if we're getting down to roster cut time and there's only room for one of those two day 3 interior O linemen from the last 2 drafts to make the 53-player roster.
Right. We're going to be keeping you up to date on that. Mace, I do have an update, though, on my mosh pit from last night.
Oh, yes. How'd that go?
Yeah.
You're here.
Awesome.
I'm
here. I showed up. I'm not in studio today, but, here's my Mr. Bungle t-shirt that I got.
As long as you didn't wear it when you were at the concert.
I did not. Don't be that guy. I got the Mr. Bungle hat. I did not wear it at the concert. I actually took my shirt off because when you're 50 and you have a 6-pack, you got to show off something, right?
Did you yell soda weight loss, state of the art?
Let me finish.
Yeah.
No, but I didn't knock anybody's shoulder out of their socket, although I almost did get knocked over one time in the mosh pit. I think I'm too old for that stuff, Mace.
I was going to say, did you think 2 decades ago you'd be 50 and in a mosh pit?
No, not at all.
There you go.
I also thought I would stop playing video games. I play PUBG every day.
Yeah.
I I've even talked to my best friend Big E about that, like,
Mhm.
because we're gamers, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, one day we're not going to be having the newest PlayStation 5 or Xbox Live X, whatever. Guess
Mhm.
what we get every time it comes out?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Are there habits that you do from your younger days that you thought, and you're not as old as I am, but like, is there anything from your younger days that you thought I would be over this by now?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I liked video games, but I wasn't into it the same degree as you are. Would not call myself a gamer per se. But I'll say this: I pretty much like the same things as I did when I was younger. I was telling my wife this not long ago. I've tried a lot of different things, but I haven't found anything I like as much as sports. Watching it, talking about it. Um, all that. And so, maybe I need to grow up, but I'd sort of rather not because I like what I do. I like what I'm talking about. I like the fact that I can make a living out of it. So, you know, sometimes they say put the toys away. I'm not ready to. I don't think I ever will be. I think basically I'm always going to care, and I'll maybe be that person who's wearing a jersey of a player to a baseball game when he's in his 60s. Knock on wood. I hope that's me walking around a baseball stadium in my retirement years, still wearing a jersey, still trying to stay with it and focus on the present rather than being tied down by the past. So
Right?
yeah.
Maybe the Broncos should focus on the
Yeah.
present instead of being tied down by the past. What?
Well,
What? What? What?
I'll say this. Sometimes I think about retirement homes, right? Like,
Okay.
your assisted living centers, whatever you want to call them. And I think to myself, we're probably not too long from those places being outfitted with gaming systems because people who are into games start hitting retirement age, right? But
Well,
we're
I
still
think the
doing that.
Wii, when the Wii came out because of like Wii bowling and stuff,
Yes.
um, they were put in retirement homes because old people could play the Wii and play Wii tennis or Wii bowling, and they could have some fun with it. It's one of the reasons why the Wii was a smash hit for
Yeah, that's
Nintendo,
true.
who always does things differently. Kind of like
Exactly.
us, Mace. We do things differently on this show. We're gonna open up.
I had to play that with you talking about the Wii.
Right, right. There you go. Look at how quick you were to dial that up, man. That's awesome.
Oh, it's 10 hours of Wii music. I've got it bookmarked.
Oh my God.
You can just play it for 10 hours straight.
That's actually not bad for writing. I don't know about you when I write.
Yeah.
I don't want football on. I
Mm-hmm.
just want something where I don't have to necessarily concentrate on it on the TV.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, for me, it's like music that I've heard before. Yeah, we are both babies, David. That's fine. We don't care. Music I've heard before and I know well. And I like to listen to that music over and over again. Like, you get in a groove. You wouldn't want to take a road trip with me because if I get into a groove with a song, I want to play it like 20 straight times. Right. And then all of a sudden you're listening to Space Age Love Song by Flock of Seagulls for an hour, just because that's the vibe I have at that moment.
Uh, you're the only one that'll get this, Mace. But they did the only Spandau Ballet song last night, and then they went back to like death metal. So in the middle of these death metal songs, they did. I know this.
Did they do it in a death metal
much
style, or they
true.
just said,
No,
we're
they
gonna
did
take
it.
it down a notch"?
Took it down several notches. Yeah. So.
Were people singing along with it too?
Oh yeah, some guy thanked them.
Yeah, because here's the thing: like, that's a song that no one wants to admit they love, but almost everyone actually does.
Yes.
So true.
Yes.
Funny how it seems. I mean, it just.
Let's just riff.
It's the sound of my soul.
That's true.
This whole show is the sound of our souls.
It is. Thank you all for joining on board with Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda. We get a little crazy once in a while, or every show, but we try to contain ourselves. Maybe the Broncos should focus on Riley Moss, a Rolling Stone of secondary. What do you mean by that in our headline, Mace?
Rolling Stone gathers no moss, and you keep him rolling. And I think when you keep him rolling, that means to have him rolling between spots and have him cross-training a bit. Now, they're going to focus on him as a cornerback first, but as Riley Moss said when I asked him point blank after the Broncos drafted him, said, hey, you had all these conversations with the Broncos. Where do they see you fitting based on those? And he said, DB, not cornerback, not safety, DB.
Yeah.
And so that means cross trading him at corner, nickelback, safety. I actually think his first role this year, there's an opening for him to be the dime back in that 6 defensive back package and being something of a rover. Sometimes you're going to line up if they're going to go 4 wide. Sometimes you're going to go in coverage on a receiver, because we are going to see more man looks this year from Vance Joseph. That's part of his background working under Wade Phillips. So you expect to see some more man looks, but then you kind of move him around, make him a chess piece type of player. And so part of it was just Rolling Stone gathers no moss, the cliche, but also you want to roll him around and roll him around a little bit.
I thought you were going to say Rolling Stone like it's a bunch of hits. You know, it's a bunch of talent in that secondary, because it is. It's one of my pieces that I'm writing at denversports.com is just about how multiple you could be with the secondary. And you heard my question to Riley Moss from Saturday. I hope I didn't offend him, because I never, like when I asked Ben DiNucci about developmental leagues, he's like, I wouldn't call it developmental. Okay. I don't mean to offend. But when I told Moss, I was like, you can play both. And he's like, well, I'm a corner. So he clearly sees himself as a nickel corner is what he's learning right now. And then we'll see, because it's Vance Joseph. He knows how to use versatile players like Isaiah Simmons and others.
It's one of the reasons why this draft was so interesting, because you have somebody who has worked with versatile players like Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins. And right out of the gate, Vance Joseph's first draft back with Denver. And I know you've gotten this indication. I've gotten every indication. Vance Joseph has a very prominent voice in that building right now. And your 2 defensive picks from day 2 are both guys who are multi-position players. You may even call them positionless. They're chess piece type of players, and getting them out there means not only being creative with them, but means you sometimes have to move other pieces around to make that work. And that's why sometimes those players don't have allure to some teams, because if you are a team, you are a coach that has a very structured way of managing your defense and managing your personnel, than those guys who are tweeners, who are more positionless. It's tough to put them in, because you're like, oh, well, I have to move. I put player X in, then I have to move player Y around and player Z around, and it becomes too much, and they don't want to deal with that. Whereas Vance Joseph, one of the things he learned from Arizona and why he's different than the coach that left Denver after the 2018 season is he's gotten accustomed to getting the most out of those players. In particular, I think Zaven Collins, one of the reasons he succeeded is because that first year, the Cardinals really struggled with Isaiah Simmons. Eventually, they kind of they figured it out over time.
Yes.
But with Zaven Collins, they learned from the experience, and in particular, Vance Joseph specifically learned from the experience of that first year of Isaiah Simmons. That was very much a mixed bag.
Now let's put that towards Riley Moss and honestly Drew Sanders and others, because think of how that could have gone differently for Zaven or Isaiah. Like, those were players that it's all about fit in the NFL. And if you don't figure out the fit with those type of players, they're misses. So history could look completely different for those two, and then the Broncos too, and more, if you didn't have Vance Joseph. And Vance Joseph gets a bad rap. I know it was bad, but 0 decisions that were made during the Vance Joseph era were actually Vance Joseph's. I want to push that towards people. Not that everyone has to be Vance Joseph's buddy or whatever, but like, he gets such a bad rap, Mace, and he's put together some good defensive plans for these type of playmakers.
He has. And look, you're not asking Vance Joseph to handle the same role that he had when he was here. It's different. A. B, you go back to those 2 years, and he was, in terms of decision making, operating with a hand tied behind his back. And let's face it, he was also dealt a bad hand at quarterback. So between having certain calls come down from upper management, if you've seen Moneyball, you know what that's like, where the management's kind of telling upper management, the GM is telling the manager Art how you're going to have these pieces and you need to play them this way. Well, it's not an environment that's going to allow an NFL coach to succeed. A functional environment involves the GM getting the players and then the coach actually choosing which players are on the roster and choosing to use them as they see fit. And that's not the way that the Broncos operated in those 2 years, unfortunately. And so that's part of what worked against Vance Joseph. And now you can also, if you watched Hard Knocks last year, you can get a glimpse of how Vance Joseph commands a room of players. I mean, when you watched Hard Knocks, or when I watched Hard Knocks last year, Cease, and I saw the way Cliff Kingsbury ran a meeting compared to Vance Joseph, it's like, okay, who should be the head coach here? Because Vance Joseph clearly seemed to be more in command of things than Kingsbury did. I got head coach vibes from VJ in a way I did not get from their actual head coach.
And isn't that funny? Because when VJ was here, Mike McCoy was the one who acted like he was the head coach and sounded like it. They said leader of men for VJ, and his first press conference is up there sweating buckets,
yeah,
and like stammering a little bit. And I was like, leader. I mean, I'll listen to Big Al. He tells me leader of men, like whatever. I don't see it, but now we see a different Vance Joseph, which is, listen, we all learn and grow. If someone heard a show that I did, 10 years ago or whatever, and it was awful, and there were some awful ones, today I would be different. I started podcasting in 2006, Mace. My very first show of the Audible, I said, welcome back to the first show in existence. And I blasted baseball within the first 30 seconds. So some things never change, but yes, with time, and that's the thing. I think if this defense struggles, because the offense is going to be better and they're going to put up more points, and the opponent is going to have to put their foot on the gas. And I think Vance Joseph is going to get ripped up and down one side and the other from these fans. And it's like, let's criticize him if it's necessary, but don't be quick to criticize VJ just yet.
Yeah, and the other thing also is, if you look at metrics that matter, right? Because I think you may end up looking at some things like total yardage, first downs, and maybe saying, oh, well, the Broncos were better in 2022 with Evero than in 2023 with Joseph. But I think you're going to have to look deeper. Look at turnovers forced. Look at points per possession, yards per possession. It's going to be a different dynamic. They're probably going to be challenged defensively in a way that they weren't last year, because a lot of teams did feel like they had to push the envelope against the Broncos because they knew their offense was so putrid, right? And that's been the case the last few years. If this offense can be at least halfway decent, then other teams are going to have to challenge the defense. And that's going to lead to maybe some more big plays. But I think it's also going to set up the opportunity for the defense to make big plays of its own in terms of takeaways. And so that's why, you may look at the end of the season and see the Broncos dropped in total defense. And I would say that probably will not end up telling the picture of what this defense really was in this coming season.
Yeah, and you pointed it out yesterday. There was never a balanced team. When we talked about the Kareem Jackson stuff, there was never balance with this football team, because the offense sucked most of the year, and then when the offense was better, the defense was giving up Christmas massacres to Baker Mayfield.
Oh, and that was the whole thing with Kareem Jackson when he was on with Rachel yesterday. He said, they never put together a three-phase game. Always something was breaking down. And you look back at I mentioned those two games after Jerry Rossberg became the interim head coach and Justin Allen became the play caller, where the offense did great but the defense struggled. We could also look at the first Chiefs game when the offense really puts it together, and the defense does get a takeaway there in the second quarter on the interception that kind of started the thing. But special teams was shaky and the defense was getting singed early on. You just didn't have a game where everything came together. When you beat Jacksonville, defense did well, offense did okay. Special teams had a complete foul up when they took a delay of game penalty on a kickoff because I think because Kendall Hinton was late getting on the field, right? I mean, it was always something last year. There was so if one phase worked, the other, and the other two didn't. Sometimes two phases would work and then the other wouldn't. There was never that game where you said, okay, this is actually the way it is supposed to look. Maybe that'll change this year. It better.
Did you just go Yoda on us?
How so?
Football always is change. Like you are kind of the football Yoda. You realize
I don't know
right?
about that. Maybe I should wear my ears. They're actually for Grogu. I got them at Disneyland.
Okay, right.
Last year. Maybe I should do that. But yeah, always in motion. The future is always.
Always in motion is Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
Under Pat Shurmur, never getting the ball.
Always in motion, but always in motion, receiving never the ball. Jerry Jeudy.
Well, if you're football Yoda, that must make me like football Jar Jar or something. But either way, we're the Star Wars. Well, I was like, I could be Yaddle, I guess. But
yeah,
everyone wants to be Mace Windu, right?
Yeah, Yaddle's a deep cut, though. I like it.
It is. It is deep cut. Only 3 of that species in the Star Wars universe that we know about: Grogu, Yaddle, and Yoda.
Yes.
So there you go.
And everyone loves Grogu because hey, I mean, Star Wars does have the commercialism to it. Okay, I mean, we have the Ewoks, we have Grogu.
Why are people so upset about that? Now, I was a kid when the Ewoks were out, and they're like, it's for a bunch of teddy bears. I'm like, I loved the Ewoks as a kid. My son, who's 23 now, he loved Jar Jar as a kid because he was a baby when Phantom Menace came out. So it's like, yes, it's for kids, everybody.
Yeah, it's for kids and then for the kid within all of us. I mean, it's okay to have cute. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I've got a Grogu sitting on the shelf that I can see here in my office. Okay. Yeah, I'm a grown ass man, 46 years old. I don't care. So anyway, Rog, you're asking if Seattle picks pan out and Russ does not, will George Payton get fired this December?
No, he'd get fired in May. Like that's when GMs are usually fired. Although we did see, what was it, Tennessee, right? Top of my head.
Yes.
So we did see some unusual timing of firings in front offices this last year. So I don't know. Maybe it's a wild, wild west now, Mason. Anything could happen.
Teams have seemed to start jettisoning their GMs at the end of a regular season, whether it's the last few weeks or early in the off season, more than in the past. Used to be you'd wait for the end of the cycle. Now, the thing with the Broncos is with Sean Payton entrenched, I don't think there's a reason to make that change then in December because Payton's going to make the hire. I think the reason why you'd make the change in December is if you were moving on from the head coach as well, and you just want a coach and GM that were in lockstep, tied together, sharing the moment, as it were. Nice little pull there, gesture-wise, Cecil. But that's not going to be the Broncos. So if what you suggested in the question, if that's how things go, Russell Wilson struggles, I think it would look more like the 2011-2012 Broncos where they got through the 2012 draft and then John Elway said goodbye to Brian Sanders.
Okay. Yeah, to the X-Man who helped to build everything. Like he learned what he wanted to learn from Brian, and I like Brian. Yeah. I always like Brian Sanders. He learned everything, and then he fired him. It's cold business, man. It's cold business.
Oh, that was, I mean, the NFL not for long right there. But yeah. You learned, and then you moved on. It's hard. And there were some who thought that might be coming for George Payton in regards to Greg Penner. And
I thought
that level, right? That the first year George Payton would kind of explain to Greg Penner, okay, these are the ins and outs, and that you think the potholes, the things you have to watch out for. What may have saved George Payton, certainly for this year, is that he was willing to basically eat the slice of humble pie and accept Sean Payton coming in. The question for George Payton, I think, becomes do things go well enough this year to where Sean Payton looks at the roster building done by George Payton in the first 2 years as GM and feel confident with where he can help take it in the future? Or does he look and say, okay, this isn't quite working out? And that's one of the things that makes this year so interesting, because you could say the evaluation process, it extends beyond the roster and maybe even other areas of the organization as well.
Okay, with your permission, Mace, I'd like to move the preseason schedule stuff to tomorrow.
That's fine.
We've got about 5 minutes left in today's show, but let's talk about the Broncos DB's coach receiving an accelerator, and an accelerator that we're seeing across the league.
Yes, it's the minority coaching accelerator. There's a thing that's going to go on at the owners' spring meeting next week up in Minneapolis. And it's designed to get minority coaches some more training and hopefully more opportunities to become head coaches and work them toward that. And one of them is Christian Parker, defensive backs coach. Does not surprise me at all that Parker got this. It's very well regarded in the Broncos locker room. And I think one of the things that underscores that is he's one of only two position coaches or coordinators who kept their jobs under Sean Payton. That says a great deal. Certainly, he deserves a good deal of credit for the emergence of Pat Surtain. Pat Surtain certainly brought a lot to the table, but Christian Parker has helped him along. The growth of some other young players to be able to contribute. You've seen PJ Locke be a solid rotational player. You see Damari Mathis look like he's going to be a very good cornerback number 2. And we'll see where Riley Moss goes in the future. But I think Christian Parker checks all the boxes of a coach who could well go places, and would not at all surprise me if we're talking about Christian Parker being somebody's coordinator this time next year.
Yeah, and Parker reminds me, Mace, of the buzz that we would hear about a young Mike McDaniel. Hell, Mike's still young. But Mike McDaniel and even Matt LaFleur were pegged as future head coaches well before they were head coaches. And it's good that the league does this accelerator. And I feel at times Vic Fangio was out of his depth when he would talk about certain issues, and when he called the NFL, oh, it's a meritocracy. Not in the coaching world.
It's not
at all in the coaching world. So as players, the Sean Payton no logos and your name's on the front. If you can play, you can play. That's true. But in the coaching world in the NFL, it's a good old boy network.
Yep.
It's a lot of nepotism. And if you're a minority candidate, you don't get the doors or the opportunities available to you as others do. And that's why when we talk, and you heard even at their Centura Health, we're about diversity and equality and inclusion, give everyone that same start, and then hire the best people, but make sure that everyone gets that opportunity to get that and to be in that position. And that's why the accelerator's in place.
And the other thing is, unfortunately, minority coaches sometimes get pigeonholed into position coach roles rather than getting a chance to spread their wings and move up a level. I think with Christian Parker, he's only 31 years old. So there's a bright future ahead of him. But being invited to this, I think, reveals where people around the league see him. And that's somebody who is very intelligent and should be a coordinator very soon. And the other thing that you like about him, you mentioned Matt LaFleur. Well, he worked with Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur gave him his first job with the Green Bay Packers back in 2019, his first NFL job. Just, he'd been in college for the previous several years, actually spending a few years in the HBCU ranks at Virginia State and Norfolk State before coming into the major college ranks and then the NFL. So he's had a pretty nice rise, but, credit to Matt LaFleur for identifying him and getting him in Green Bay. And then he works under Vic Fangio. Say what you will about Vic as a head coach, but as a defensive mind, that's a terrific person to spend a year under, as he did back in 2021. So you see the influences adding up, and now he's going to get a dose of Sean Payton and learn from him as well. And so you like what Christian Parker's developing in terms of his network and in terms of who he's learning from. I'm fascinated to see what type of coach he becomes. And for someone like Christian Parker, who has worked under Fangio, who has worked under Matt LaFleur, I wonder how much impact Sean Payton's going to have on him too. And if someday Christian Parker becomes a head coach, what style does he take? Does he follow the Payton way? Or is he going to be more like Matt LaFleur, of course, coming out of that Shanahan McVay school?
Mm-hmm.
As Gary Kubiak would say, we're fixing to find out.
We are fixing to find out. One of the greatest quotes of all time. Thank you, Gary, for that. And finally, on the minority coach thing, Mace, and I would like you to interject, please. Other than Mike Tomlin, who's fast-tracked? Most minority coaches are pigeonholed into position coaches. And hell, and we're revealing a lot, and we can reveal more, trust me. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of teams that do not want players or former players as coaches. They'll have them as interns, and you get to intern for free for a year and do work just like a coach, work 20 hours a day just like a coach, but you're not getting paid. But players are not hired or promoted as coaches because teams don't think they can put in the work. So if a minority coach gets to a coordinator level, they're pigeonholed there. And other than Mike Tomlin, I can't really think of anyone that was fast-tracked. Sean McVay gets fast-tracked. Like, I think that fast-track should be available for quality coaches like Parker.
Yeah, and the other thing is with Mike Tomlin, the fast-track happened with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The connection there, of course, is Tomlin was very familiar with Tony Dungy. I don't think he worked directly for Dungy, but, was connected with Monty Kiffin in Tampa Bay. And of course, Dungy had Monty Kiffin on his staff, and then Monty stayed through the transition to John Gruden. And Tony Dungy back in the day played for the Pittsburgh Steelers and coached for the Pittsburgh Steelers on their staff under Chuck Noll. And so in some ways, the Mike Tomlin hire is where you want this thing to get to with minority coaches, where the network works in their favor rather than working against them. But if we all know the Pittsburgh Steelers are a very unique organization historically, as you know, Cecil, being a Steelers fan, out in the forefront along with the Kansas City Chiefs and Dallas Cowboys back in the 60s of mining HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, for talent. They had minorities in key places in their organization. One of the all-time great scouts in NFL history, Bill Nunn, worked for the Steelers for a long time. So that Pittsburgh being decades ahead of doing the right thing regarding minorities in their building and having those people develop and have the opportunities that everyone should have. That system, the good old boy network in Pittsburgh, actually end up working for Mike Tomlin getting that job. That's where you want this thing to eventually get to, where that network just sustains itself naturally. But we are so far away. When you look at the hirings year after year, it's like we're not close. We are a long way off. Doesn't mean we can't get there, but we still have a ways to go league wide on this.
That's why I always made the joke Brett Rippon would be a head coach before Eric Bieniemy. And it's like, okay. And remember, the Steelers could have taken the easy way out because it was going to be Russ Grimm. It was going to be Russ Grimm and Ken Woods and Hunt. Grimm and Hunt, like almost co-head coaches, right? And that's Russ Grimm. It would be almost as if Mark Schlereth had been in the waiting to coach for the Broncos. And, it's like everyone goes, that's the next head coach. That's what, and the Steelers did a total like zig-zag thing, and they went in a direction that people weren't expecting because everyone thought, well, Russ Grimm's just going to get that job.
But here's the funky thing is that in terms of resume and experience, Mike Tomlin had much more in common with the Hall of Fame coaches who preceded him in Pittsburgh than Wiz and Hunt or Grimm would have. Tomlin had a relatively similar level of experience and age to Chuck Noll back in 1969 and Bill Cowher in 1992. And honestly, that's one of the things that gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling when I see Mike Tomlin on that sideline. First of all, you might find coaches as good, but I don't think you're going to find a better coach in terms of motivation, leadership, adaptability than Mike Tomlin. Period. Maximizing what he's got, no one better. So To me, he's the complete package as a head coach, but he fits that Steeler mindset. Like it's, I can't. It's now and now, but it didn't take long. Only 2 or 3 years in with Mike Tomlin. See, so I'm like, I can't imagine anybody else coaching that team. He's just, I mean, he's he's like he's like Chuck Noll, except he's a little more forceful in how he speaks publicly and speaks to the team. But he is very much like Chuck Noll, like, and that's why and I think it's perfect, and it's lovely to see that. And yeah, I'm blathering here, but I'm a huge Mike Tomlin fan. I will admit to you, Cease, when the Broncos knew they were going to have a coaching change, my dream was that somehow the Steelers would get stupid and say, let's move on from Mike Tomlin, because in my heart of hearts, that's the guy I really, really wanted to coach the Broncos.
There were buzz about that potentially happening, so it didn't. Like, and it's weird to think like 3 coaches in our lifetimes.
I know
3, and all of them are Hall of Famers.
Yes, yeah. Tomlin's going to be a Hall of Famer. Like the resume's there. If Bill Cowher's a Hall of Famer, Mike Tomlin's case is already set. But the thing I would always say whenever the pie in the sky idea came up would be like, if Pittsburgh were stupid enough to do that. But the thing is, when are the Pittsburgh Steelers stupid? That's the thing. They haven't been. Not for a very, very long time. Not in either of our lifetimes have they been an organization that you could consider stupid. So they were smart. They stuck with Mike Tomlin. And you know what? Even though you look around the AFC and see this dazzling array of quarterbacks, and Kenny Pickett clearly isn't on that level, Pittsburgh is going to be there pushing for the playoffs once again, like they always are. What I'm hopeful of with Sean Payton is that you can say the same thing about the Broncos, that even though they may not have the quarterback, we're going to learn about Russell Wilson this year, even though they may not have all the pieces, by golly, they're competitive and they've got a shot. That's what, at minimum, that's what I want to see this team get back to. And that was the case, that was the case in New Orleans for Sean Payton, but he had Drew Brees. We're about to see the real test of Sean Payton here coming up. But that being said, we have some returns from 2021 in particular, when they started with Jameis Winston, then he got hurt, and they still had a 9-8 season. So we have an indication that Sean Payton may be able to have those types of seasons even when all the pieces aren't in place. And that's a good place to start. It's a good foundation.
Orange and Blue today, presented by Shop Honda. We're going to get to the preseason schedule stuff tomorrow, and we still have rookie minicamp notes to go over. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on Twitter. He is at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey, and we love you guys, and always appreciate the love and the insight. And we're chatty, and we're crazy, and we're a little silly, so thank you for riding along with us as we jump through our silliness hoops. He's Mace. I'm Cease. OBT is a BFD, and we appreciate you. Until next time, be safe, be kind. Know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned, and as always, please stay frosty.